Halo semuanya, really grateful to be here today with you all. So hopefully bisa sharing beberapa hal yang useful buat semuanya di sini. Itu aja sih dari gue.
Oke. Renata, dirimu punya sekitar 20 menit untuk present, and then we'll continue with Q&A. So the floor is yours.
Okay, sure. So hi everyone. Jadi hari ini gue seneng banget karena di task oleh salah satu teman gue juga sebenarnya, which is Juan di sini. Salah satu koordinatornya juga untuk sharing soal MVP gitu. Tapi sebelum ngomongin soal MVP, kayaknya gue mau ngomongin dulu kayak, oke, gue siapa sih gitu. Nah, terus tadi sebenarnya udah dikasih brief summary juga sama Jody. Tapi buat, I think to set the expectation right gitu. Aku tahu kayak teman-teman di sini banyak yang nggak semuanya itu menyediakan produk software ya, ada yang hardware juga gitu kan, ada juga yang bahkan bukan related soal software dan hardware gitu ya, kayak produk physical yang lain gitu. Jadi I think to just set the expectation right, gue mau share kalau misalnya most of my experience itu adalah building data platform tools gitu, and kebetulan emang karena it's a data platform tool, definitely it's an internal product, and at the same time mungkin gue bisa lebih banyak share experience karena it's more like a B2b. Jadi kayak how so me as a product manager in Gojek, building a data platform tool, our customer itu kayak seakan-akan tuh Gojek sebenarnya gitu. Jadi Gojek, GoPay, Moka, Mitrans, Mapan, GoFin itu semuanya customer kita gitu. Jadi it's more like a B2B business. We're thinking about open sourcing most of our tools juga to contribute back to the community of like engineering and like data analytics. Tapi that's a bit of background of who am I in a way. Selanjutnya adalah walaupun gue di particular mungkin next yuk ya, walaupun di particular test langsung ngomongin soal MVP, tapi kayak mungkin mesti ada background juga ya, kenapa sih kita perlu ngomongin soal MVP ini gitu. So if you go to the next slide, kalau kita zoom out gitu, kecepetan deh kayaknya, ke slide yang sebelumnya. Yes, the slide. Wah, yang graph. Yeah, the slide. So, jadi sebenarnya if you zoom out, MVP itu penting buat apa sih gitu? MVP itu penting buat, it's kind of like a test kan, kayak testing supaya lu bisa achieve ujung-ujungnya tuh lu punya product vision gitu. Nah, tapi sebelum lu bisa achieve product vision lu, definitely you need to ada product market fit dulu gitu kan. Nah, dan sebenarnya kalau gue kemarin juga sempat ngobrol sama Juan, kalau misalnya kalian in previous days itu udah sempat ada session soal ngomongin kayak gimana sih design thinking, kayak gimana sih making sure that the problem statement that you have itu adalah benar-benar something yang user want gitu. That's basically some of the foundational work to ensure that lu punya product vision tuh okay. Nah, so if you go to the next slide, I just want to make sure that we're aligned gitu, kayak on the definition of apa sih product vision, apa sih product market fit gitu. So in terms of the product vision, I think it was like the slide. Yeah, okay. Jadi yang paling penting adalah kayak you really know kayak what is your user segmentation gitu kan. Jadi in terms of mungkin demographically orang-orang ini misal income bracketnya kayak gimana, age range-nya gimana, tinggalnya biasa di mana, apakah lebih banyak female atau male yang lu targetin, mereka punya intention tuh apa sih, background hidup mereka kenapa sih sampai kepengen produk lo gitu biasanya. Nah itu benar-benar clear gitu, dan gue tahu gue sempat di-share juga sama teman-teman di sini kalau kalian juga udah pernah ngedraft soal itu di my role kalian, kayak target market kalian apa, which is that's great gitu, especially if you're planning to target this user segment in the next 2 to 5 years. Nah terus the next juga adalah ya definitely the service that you're planning to give. Nah terus in terms of product market fit, before you be able to achieve the product vision gitu kan, product market fit itu adalah the smallest possible product that you could discover that sufficiently sell gitu. Nah ini menurut gue ini sebenarnya konsep paling penting sebelum even you go to MVP gitu. Jadi kayak MVP lu sebenarnya buat apa sih gitu loh. MVP lu adalah buat product market fit gitu kan. Nah product market fit itu tuh apa gitu. Product market fit itu adalah ketika lu bisa ngedeliver sebuah produk yang user tuh benar-benar mau kasih duit buat itu gitu loh. Nah, tapi usernya tuh yang mana juga? Apakah semua user ratusan yang gue targetin di product vision gue mesti beli? Ya enggak gitu. Start small gitu. Start small-nya yang gue targetin nih orang yang tinggal di alam sutra misalnya, umur segini udah punya keluarga atau kayak gimana. Nah, kita mulai aja rekrut beberapa orang dulu gitu, less than 10 people. Nah, kita define itu jadi early evangelist customer kita gitu. Nah, jadi yang penting orang-orang sekecil ini dulu yang mau beli produk kita, dan itu adalah definisi kita product market fit gitu. Nah, the next slide. Nah, jadi ini balik lagi gitu ya. Jadi kayak mau coming back to ensure the concept that we have so far itu kayak join together gitu kan. Jadi kita udah ada definisi product vision yang selama ini kalian juga udah kemarin juga draft, product market fit itu apa gitu kan. Dan this is why we're talking about MVP right now. So this is just getting to understand the holistically kenapa kita ngomongin MVP gitu. So in the next slide, even before kita ngomongin MVP lagi nih, gak cuma the why gitu. Tapi apa namanya kalau if you go to the next slide again, from zero paling kiri gitu ya sampai akhirnya lu ke product market fit itu kan kayak proses ya, dan gue sengaja tulisannya tuh MVP pakai S gitu, nggak MVP-nya cuma satu terus tuh udah sip product market fit gitu ya. Most probably lu mesti iterate gitu beberapa MVP sampai akhirnya lu mencapai product market fit gitu. Dan yang paling easy adalah buat mulai recruit this 6 people. Nah, kenapa gue bahas 6 people? Karena emang di luar sana kalau lu lihat di internet beberapa kayak I would say senior banget lah product manager who have like 30 years of experience kayak gitu. Mereka rule utamanya emang biasanya buat especially B2b product itu 6 gitu. And for B2C product around 10 to 15 gitu. Nah, jadi at least you recruit this number of people yang benar-benar within your segment yang sama seperti yang product vision lo, dan mereka benar-benar mau beli produk lo gitu loh, sampai akhirnya lo bisa bilang lo product market fit gitu. Nah, if you go to the next slide, kenapa sih ini penting banget gitu, this concept of kayak yang penting lo mesti kasarnya convince or this 6 people or this 15 people. Go to the previous slide, sorry. This like 6 to 15 people itu pakai produk lo gitu kan kasarnya. Karena kayak simple aja sih, kalau misalnya lo nggak bisa convince 6-15 orang ini, gimana lo mau bilang lo nge-nargetin ratusan orang, thousands of people, millions of people gitu. Kayak misalnya like a very easy example kan, kayak misalnya Gojek gitu. Gojek sekarang emang jutaan usernya gitu, tapi sebelumnya ya pas dimulai itu bener-bener less than 10 people gitu, telepon ke call center gitu, teman-teman dia doang gitu. Nah jadi it all start from somewhere, and it's very important to crack that first. And what's useful is that once you have the 6 to 10 people who really love your product, that would be easier for you nanti buat ngejual ke orang lain gitu. Jadi lu nggak perlu spend too much money on marketing, too much money on sales, karena these people would evangelize for your product gitu, because they like your product gitu. So next slide. So this is just like a really easy explanation as to what is the early evangelist customer gitu. Tadi gue taruh gambar SpongeBob sama itu buat kayak ngitung gitu, kayak jadi 6 orang kan, biar lucu-lucu aja. Cuman intinya adalah kayak these people need to be people yang benar-benar experience the pain point, desperate perlu solusi gitu. Tapi at the same time mereka juga believe sama visi produk lo mau kemana company lo, terus sama willing together to work with you to discover the solution. Definitely nggak bisa dibilang susah banget, tapi nggak bisa bilang gampang banget juga buat nge-recruit these people gitu. Dan nanti kita bakal bahas juga kayak kalau misalnya lu merasa susah tuh kayak gimana ya nge-recruit orang kayak gitu. Nah, go to the next slide. Nah, beberapa hal yang lu mungkin mau emphasize ketika lu recruit these people adalah kayak, bro, kayak lu kan ngalamin masalah ini banget nih gitu. Nah, ini gue kasih lu opportunity nih, dapat early access buat solutionnya. Dan mestinya kalau dia bener-bener mengalami problem itu, semestinya mereka justru happy banget gitu, bakal dapat relief gitu. Dan mereka happy banget karena mereka bisa kasih input early on soal ke produk itu, dan juga there's significant reduce cost gitu. Contohnya adalah misalnya sekarang gitu kan, kayak gue ngebikin data platform gitu. Nah, for these entities gitu. Nah, it significantly reduce dia punya cost karena mereka nggak perlu lagi tuh sendiri-sendiri setiap entity data timnya tuh POC ke semua different products dan segala macamnya. Kayak we have done that for them gitu. Terus juga in terms of there is definitely certain gaps yang nggak bisa yang problem mereka tetap sama dan nggak bisa di-solve dengan solusi yang di luar sana, dan akhirnya kita build itu satu dan bisa diimplement ke semua tim gitu kan. Nah, jadi that's also reducing their cost significantly gitu. To the next slide. Nah, benefit for you ya definitely lah ya, kayak lu dapat user and customer yang available for you to have an ongoing question and dialogue. Also agree kalau misalnya lu software product buat test version MVP lu atau version 1 lu gitu kan. And kalau misalnya mereka happy with your product, they would agree to serve as someone yang nanti ditaruh di testimonial atau kayak gimana gitu kan. So and this is the definition when people say, menurut gue, customers obsessed company gitu. Kayak kadang-kadang orang bilang, oh gue customer obsessed, tapi apa gitu. Nah, ini adalah satu hal yang paling fundamental yang lu bisa bilang, gue customer obsessed karena I work together with my customer. I know that they are part of my customer segment. Work together to find a solution with them. Go to next slide. Oke. Nah, ada beberapa caveat. It's very clear that you cannot ask people to pay to participate in this like mencari MVP together gitu ya kasarnya. Karena ketika lu ngambil duit dari mereka kasarnya, mereka bakal ada expectation-nya, lu bikin dong customize buat gue gitu. Karena kan gue udah bayar lu gitu. Dan ketika lu mulai customize certain feature cuman buat satu atau dua company, yang ada nanti akhirnya you might be left with a business yang nggak sustainable karena ternyata nggak general enough buat everyone, dan sebenarnya ini bakal merugikan mereka juga gitu kan, karena kalau misalnya lu sampai go down gitu kan, mereka bakal left with a solution yang unsupported gitu kan, dan nggak ada yang maintain lagi gitu. Nah, tapi definitely you can take their money after you actually deliver a product that they love, but not like gue mau bikin bisnis nih, lu mau ikutan nggak jadi customer council gue gitu, tapi lu bayar ya tiap bulan ya, nggak bisa kayak gitu. Nah, expectation-nya beda kan, jadi kayak gue udah bayar, lu mah software house aja buat gue gitu, nanti malah kayak gitu kan. Nah, and also ideally lu pasti kepengen bikin bisnis yang in the long run lah, sustainable gitu, nggak cuma buat 1 tahun 2 tahun kan. Jadi kepengennya you build a relationship more like a partnership with them, not like a very transactional way that can last for decades gitu. And so yeah, next adalah ke selanjutnya. What if you have trouble recruiting this customer gitu? Actually, that's a really good news gitu sebenarnya. Karena at least you know now that maybe problem statement lo itu nggak gede enough gitu loh, atau nggak important enough buat mereka. At least you know now gitu, rather than you already invest a lot of money to build it gitu kan. And also it's a good not just reality check to actually stress test lo punya product vision overall, tapi juga ya mungkin mesti pivot a lot of things gitu, either the product vision-nya, customer segmentation-nya, and all that. So that's a good thing if you know it early on gitu. Next-nya lagi. Nah, ini yang perbedaannya mungkin kalau misalnya B2B to 6 people cukup, kalau B2C 10 to 15 people, and yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing. You need to know how what is their real environment when they're using your product gitu. Nextnya lagi. Nah, setelah kayak lu udah recruit those people, and then you build the MVP to stress test it, and then like biar dapat product market fit, terus habis itu biar ujung-ujungnya bisa achieve lu punya product vision 2 to 5 years down the line, right? What is the real definition of MVP sih gitu kan? MVP itu kan minimum viable product gitu. Product obviously kayak semuanya yang tahu lah ya. Nah, cuman kayak minimum itu apa sih, kayak kadang-kadang gue merasa gue sering banget ya, even dulu gue melakukan kesalahan ini gitu loh. Gue pikir gue bikin MVP, tapi sebenarnya gue bikin minimum product, not a minimum viable product gitu loh. Jadi kayak gue cuman kayak lu coba dong tes produk gue gitu. Oke bro, gitu. Sip, berarti MVP gue oke gitu. Padahal enggak gitu. Ternyata adalah something yang gue salahin adalah sebenarnya itu enggak checklist viable-nya gitu. When I didn't actually check gitu whether people are using that product day to day, week to week, and also maybe they want to pay for that product gitu kan. Jadi it's very important for us to very clear at what is our definition of viable. Next slide. Nah, and it might be the case that your product is great gitu, tapi mungkin pricing yang nggak cocok, atau people are actually already happy with dia punya solution yang sekarang mereka udah pakai sekarang, atau it's very hard for people to switch, and this is very a common thing buat di platform product di ranah gue ya, karena pindah dari satu platform ke another tuh costly banget gitu loh. Jadi it might be your product is already great, tapi mereka susah banget buat switch gitu, makanya mereka nggak mau. Jadi makanya it's very important to assess your MVP, that real definition of MVP early on gitu. But make sure you're testing for the viability of it too, not just the minimum of it. Just kayak hanya misalnya cisatnya atau kayak gimana. Next, ya. Jadi selanjutnya adalah kayak gimana sih caranya kayak lu prioritize yang mana yang lu mau jadiin MVP dulu. Nah, one of the things that you need to do adalah you need to find a metric that you want to track for your product kan. Nah, salah satu framework yang menurut gue useful adalah game framework gitu. You guys can definitely search it by yourself in terms of kayak gimana sih bener pakainya. Tapi it's a very so far I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of PMs in Gojek and outside of Gojek, and this have been it has a very good name in terms of deciding what metric you need to choose. So you guys can definitely try this. Next slide-nya. Gue kayak keburu-buru gitu ya, 10 menit. Terus nextnya adalah ketika lu udah tahu nih ya, kayak metrik lu tuh maunya apa gitu kan, itu adalah metrik yang lu bisa measure to ketika lu nge-decide impact lu tuh apa gitu. Jadi misalnya lu punya metrik adalah soal weekly active user misalnya ya. Nah, impact-nya itu adalah seberapa sih menurut lo dari intuition lo probability kayak impact ke metrik ini bisa naik tuh, maksudnya maksimum impact-nya tuh tinggi atau enggak gitu. Nah, you can also research on this on using RISE framework. Tapi one thing that I think would be useful adalah actually go to your user, terus habis itu list them like maybe 10 problem statement. Terus habis itu bilang ke mereka, gue kasih 5 points gitu. Lu bisa kasih satu problem statement, kalau misalnya parah banget perlu di-solve, lu kasih 5-5-nya ke problem statement itu, atau lu spread towards the 5 yang lain. Tapi lu nggak bisa pilih 10 gitu kan. Nah, jadi when you ask them to do this, all of your 6 customer, you'll be able to get a realistic view as to which one yang menurut mereka tuh paling impactful gitu. Dan lu confident rate juga lebih tinggi kan, karena you kind of already test it with the user kan, buat mereka pilih sendiri gitu. Jadi, and reach is just the number of potential user yang lu bisa target, and effort is just the number of weeks or months that you need to actually build that product. And definitely, this is just something to start with. You can definitely adjust it, adjust the framework depending on your situation. Nextnya lagi. Ya, jadi yeah, basically that's it, right? Kelihatannya simple ya, kayak conceptually gitu. Start with recruiting those 6 people if you're a B2B. Start recruiting 10 to 50 people if you're a B2C. Make sure these people are part of the user segmentation that you're looking towards, kayak solving in your product vision, and work together with them to develop this MVP. Dan ketika lu develop mana sih yang mau gua deliver as the first MVP, second MVP, ya work together using that prioritization framework kan. You can start with that. You can try something else to decide kayak which one which of this like feature or basically feature of a product that you want to prioritize as the first MVP gitu. So yeah, I think that's all from my side. Nextnya lagi ke references. Yeah, definitely this is not like all original content by me. This is all the list of references that I use in terms of creating this content. However, I've curated it, adjusted based on my experience, mana yang proven to be useful, especially when you're starting out with a B2B company gitu. Itu aja dari gua. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata, for the very compact presentations. Mari kita berikan sedikit waktu untuk teman-teman mencerna what just went through. It is a very compact materials about building your product and MVPs. Aku akan kasih waktu buat teman-teman mikir apakah ada sesuatu yang ingin teman-teman tanyakan, dan juga atau mungkin bahkan di konteks teman-teman masing-masing, what are the challenges that because you already have some semblance of your MVP, mungkin udah iterasi ketiga, udah keempat, atau bahkan ada yang masih pertama kedua. What are your challenges in building those products? And maybe you can consult with Renata, and if there are any similarities to the framework yang kalian mau cek. But before we start there, is there any questions? Right, while waiting for other people, aku mungkin nanya duluan sama Renata. Ren, dirimu kan udah jadi product manager 4 tahun, dan it's a very big company, and you started as the people in the product line gitu kan. Dan of course banyak tarik menarik antara what can we do visibly as in kayak technology constraints, terus kemudian human resource constraint, terus kemudian time constraints gitu kan, sama apa yang ingin dicapai di turunan pertama, product vision gitu. So how do we navigate tarik menarik itu? Karena kadang-kadang kalau misalnya kita prioritize pun, misalnya kita bilang, oh the customer find this most impactful, but these are like 3 things yang kalau kita mau develop ternyata took like 4 months, and there is no way we can wait too long untuk iterate the MVP kan. So how do you navigate kebutuhan-kebutuhan itu untuk bisa create a product that matters most at that point in time?
To be honest, it's more like an art juga kan. Kayak maksudnya there's no right and wrong answer gitu. Kayak maksudnya gue sotoy banget gitu kalau bilang kalau kayak lu mestinya begini gitu ya. Kayak maksudnya semua kondisinya beda-beda gitu kan. Cuman I think what's important yang kayak tadi gue cover adalah making sure that lu tuh tahu customer lu siapa sih, karena kayak gue sering banget sebenarnya ketemu sama teman-teman yang lain gitu ya, bilang mau bikin startup, tapi mereka tuh belum pernah ngomong even sama customernya, nggak ada counsel, nggak gue nanya tiap minggu lu ngobrol nggak sama customer lu, kagak juga gitu. Jadi I think it's very important to have that relationship with your customer gitu kan, and work together with them to prioritize bareng sih. Kalau misalnya definitely 3-4 bulan kan waktu yang lama gitu. Pastinya lu kepengen ideally less than a year, less than a month gitu. Tapi kan makanya tadi gue bilang ya, kayak gue kan ngomongin from the software product perspektif gitu. Teman-teman yang bikin hardware ya pasti gue rasa 3 bulan aja tuh kayak cepet banget mungkin ya gitu. Jadi kalau misalnya kita ngomongin software, definitely emang 4 bulan is a long time, dan emang lu mesti at least kayak 3 weeks or less gitu kan. Dan ideally lu bisa ruthlessly prioritize bareng customer lo. Coba aja misalnya dari 1 atau 2 feature dulu dibanding 3 feature itu, terus coba mereka tes gitu. Terus lu lihat mereka berdampaknya atau enggak gitu. Lu mesti nge-track kan, lu bisa nge-track-nya kan. Kalau misalnya ternyata dia bilang dia butuh 2, nih juga sering kejadian kan. Dia bilang dia butuh 2 itu, tapi dia nggak pakai juga gitu loh. Ngerti gak sih? Kayak ada juga kan kayak gitu kan. Iya, jadi itu yang lu mesti debug bareng gitu loh. Tapi it's not like apa ya, it takes a especially in a new industry gitu kan, it is an iterative process dan you need to work together with your customer. Yang penting you need to be sure that the customer that you insert in your customer council itu adalah the right set of customer for you gitu, based on your product vision gitu. Yep.
I see. Great answer. Jadi memastikan kita recruiting the right set of customer and then make sure that we talk to them constantly, nggak cuma waktu kita bilang, oh kita ada MVP nih, baru kita ngobrol sama dia, but make that process iterative and as closing the feedback loop as quick as possible.
Yeah.
Kita udah punya 3 pertanyaan by the way. They just need some time to digest and then now they have a lot of questions. We start with Mas Randi Ravelware.
Halo, tes. Halo.
Yes.
Halo Mas Randi.
Halo, salam kenal Kak Renata. Perkenalkan saya Randi, saya dari Ravelware. Ini tadi saya butuh waktu buat mencerna soal rise score ini. Jujur ini menurut saya menarik banget ya, karena kita bisa mengkuantisasikan sesuatu yang kualitatif gitu. Cuman pertanyaan saya ini, kan saya ini baca-baca juga nih tentang rise score. Ini ada risk, impact, confidence, effort. Saya masih agak nyaru soal confidence dan effort. Dalam artian gini, confidence definisinya adalah how confident are you in your estimates. Ini berarti subjektif sekali ya di stakeholder perusahaan kita. Terus pertanyaan kedua saya, untuk effort ini satuannya hanya bulan sajakah atau kita bisa memasukkan satuan untuk duit yang dikeluarkan juga gitu. Karena kan definisi effort sendiri kalau di kepala saya itu selain waktu dan resource juga yang terbuang dalam hal ini adalah duit. Terus pertanyaan ketiga saya, untuk menentukan minimum score untuk produk kita, itu bagaimana? 3 pertanyaan itu, Kak. Thank you.
Oke, siap. Jadi gini, Mas.
Fantastic. Mungkin dirimu bisa jawab dulu biar nggak lupa.
Apa? Oh, iya. Jadi just to be clear, yang pertama sekalian gue tulis di notes gue. Jadi yang pertama, by the way, those are really good question, Mas Randy. Jadi yang pertama adalah gimana nih kayak kita decide confident kan? Karena confident seems like very subjective gitu kan. Terus habis itu juga kayak effort, can we use like not just months tapi juga duit gitu kan? Nah terus habis itu yang ketiga adalah, tadi gue lupa sih. Coba gue jawab yang dua dulu ya. Pertama
minimum.
Dulu.
Skor minimum.
Ya, skor minimum. Oke, skor minimum. Oke. Jadi buat yang confident, definitely Mas, gue setuju banget. Itu tuh emang subjektif. Cuman kita tuh definitely in prioritization, there's no ideal solution. Tapi there's a better solution, gitu kan sebenarnya. Nah, what I experience is that previously itu biasanya orang pakai cuman impact to effort, that's all gitu. Nah, tapi setelah gue coba dengan rise score personally gitu, gue merasa bener juga ya. Terkadang tuh gue ada nuances yang kayak gue ngerasa impactnya begini, gue ngerasa effortnya gini pas ngomong sama engineer. Tapi sebenarnya mereka bilang ke gue gitu, gue nggak confident banget sih cuy gitu, misalnya gitu ya. Dan gue selama ini nggak incorporate itu. Nah, tapi di formula ini at least gue jadi ada sarana kasarnya untuk nge-incorporate itu ke formula gua, walaupun itu juga subjektif gitu. Nah, jadi makanya what is very important adalah to have that usability test yang tadi gue bilang, kayak misalnya suruh customer lu buat pilih nih, kalau problem statement-nya ini atau feature-nya ini, lu mau prioritasin yang mana, biar kita punya confidence itu bisa lebih tinggi gitu. Dan at least walaupun subjektif, ada beberapa data point adalah karena gue udah coba tes ini nih sama user, jadi makanya mungkin confident gue buat feature ini atau problem statement ini lebih tinggi dibanding yang lain, kayak gitu. Nah, yang selanjutnya adalah buat effort. Nah, effort gue setuju Mas, kayak bisa aja soal duit, dan itu nggak apa-apa, asalkan kita make sure adalah itu konsisten gitu. Jangan sampai satu feature atau satu inisiatif kita measure effortnya itu dari duit, tapi yang lainnya by time gitu ya misalnya. Jadi make sure aja itu konsisten throughout all of the initiative yang ketika kayak kita mau measure gitu. Karena sebenarnya kan sama kan. Itu dibikinnya kan formulanya tuh dibagi sama effort. Jadi yang kalau effortnya makin tinggi, misalnya makin jelek kan sebenarnya gitu kan. Jadi selama duitnya makin tinggi ya makin jelek gitu. Jadi it's okay as long as it can be consistent throughout the initiative gitu. Nah, yang ketiga adalah skor minimum. Sebenarnya nggak ada mas skor minimum, tapi kan namanya kan prioritization. Jadi lebih ke halo, kedengaran nggak ya suara gue? Halo?
Yes,
Iya,
lanjut.
kedengar sorry
Oh,
tadi
kedengeran
putus.
ya? Oh, oke. Ya, jadi prioritization itu sebenarnya bukan masalah lu mau cut out certain things, tapi lebih sorting gitu loh, ya kan? Lebih sorting gitu loh. Jadi semuanya skornya dapat, terus habis itu di-sort dari yang paling tinggi sampai paling rendah, terus ya tergantung istilahnya dari ngobrolan mas sama customer-nya, kira-kira yang mana sih yang yang paling minimum yang si customer bisa bilang, oke, gue mau bayar nih buat ini gitu, buat feature ini gitu. Jadi itu benar-benar tergantung cut off dari intuisi mas sebenarnya, ngobrol sama customer gitu. Cut off-nya mana, feature-nya perlu mana, sampai akhirnya si user mau bayar gitu. Gitu aja sih mas. Yep.
I see, fantastic. Jadi kalau misalnya gue cuma ngambil the last soundbite, kadang-kadang we can try to have as rigid data as possible, but then at the end of the day, intuisi itu play a really large role di early stage of your startup. So hone that and talk to your customer. Kita punya next Irene dari Turtle Safe.
Halo, siang. Salam
Halo
kenal Kak
Irene.
Renata, saya Irene dari Turtle Safe. Thank you banget for the presentation, it's really insightful ya. Dan itu somehow it relates to me gitu. I really want to sharing my struggle going through MVP to prototyping the stage here. So my understanding about MVP that from your presentation that we have to work with the 6 early users, right? And then from my understanding as well that we have to do like maybe like interview, maybe like FGD. The purpose is to find their pain point and then find their hidden needs, right? And then this is my struggle actually. So I'm just like wondering, like, when we come to maybe like sizing, it's actually sizing the problems, and then realize that the market size is really niche. Yeah, maybe that problems is only experienced by really small of people, and you know that when we pitch to investor, like one of the aspects that they always look at our startup is the market size, right? So what is your your points, feedbacks actually on that? Yeah, so I just don't want to fall into trap that we work on the problems that only experienced by small amount of people.
Ini kayak jawaban, I think my answer is going to be quite philosophical ya. Kayak, okay. So, I think it depends ya. I don't necessarily think, this is my personal opinion ya. I don't have any VC background. I don't have an agenda here that I want to fund someone here. Atau kayak gimana, kan gue nggak ada ya agenda seperti itu ya. Right. Kayak, jadi kalau menurut gue sih, it depends sih. Kayak maksudnya, why do you want to make your business gitu? Is it more like terkadang kan ada bisnis-bisnis yang lebih social enterprise ya, dimana it's not about getting funded gitu ya, it's about making certain impact to certain people aja gitu, dan itu emang expected is only niche of these people gitu, dan you work together and you can sustain a business gitu by yourself with just catering that niche market gitu. Contohnya misalnya tisu yang dari bambu gitu ya, kayak itu kan lebih mahal ya gitu, dan pasti niche gitu. Tapi ya it can sustain a business gitu, even though it cannot grow into a Gojek atau Traveloka gitu ya. Which kalau misalnya investor VC gitu kan funding kepengennya begituan kan, maksudnya mau biar nanti di series round A, series round B, series round C makin tinggi gitu. Nah, sedangkan kalau misalnya social enterprise itu nggak bisa gitu kan. Jadi bukan nggak bisa ya, rada jarang lah gitu. Nah, jadi sebenarnya tergantung sih. Kayak menurut aku jangan sampai the need to get funding mengalahkan your purpose of building that business gitu, or the problem statement that you're trying to solve gitu loh. Karena terkadang just like trying to and the funding ya, mungkin lo nggak perlu dapat funding dari traditional VCs gitu loh, mungkin lo bisa dapat funding dari CSR company yang emang looking to fund tapi nggak perlu grow gimana karena mereka lebih peduli social impact-nya, atau from individual who are philanthropy gitu kan, that want to fund gitu, so you can still get funding and sustain your purpose of your business gitu without the need to apa ya, jadi malahan mungkin sedihnya adalah you have a good vision, you have a good purpose, tapi akhirnya gara-gara nggak dapat funding dari traditional VCs, jadi lu stop doing your and even the small impact that you can give gitu loh. Jadi itu aja sih, just to be mindful. Yep.
Yes.
But sorry.
Nah,
Tapi itu kalau misalnya lo emang udah clarify, udah ngomong konsult berapa orang, kalau ini emang niche lo gitu, emang problem statement lo niche gitu, dan kalau begitu emang begitu gitu, dan nggak apa-apa gitu loh. Tapi kalau misalnya emang belum sempet di-stress sama orang-orang dan ternyata sebenarnya nggak niche gitu, ya itu beda cerita lagi gitu. Tapi itu sih, ya hope menjawab.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, I struggle a lot actually going through that cycle. Yeah, like finding the problem, and sometimes like we were actually being forced to find like really specific problems, and then when we size the problem is actually really niche market. So yeah, I keep going back into that circle actually. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. So just to just to add on to what Renata says. Pertanyaan dirimu ini juga sebenarnya akan kita bahas di modul 6 dan 9, di mana kita akan ngomongin tentang how do you pitch to different kind of investors and how you size your market. Karena kayak yang Renata bilang, your business needs to show a good traction and good metrics and good models, and the market can be invisible atau kayak can be blurry in the first few months or first few years. Kayak Gojek di 3 tahun pertama, 5 tahun pertama, people say they are crazy. Siapa yang mau biayain? But once Uber model works outside, then it makes sense in Indonesia gitu. So my point is to add on to what Renata says, which is very true. Sometimes we don't need funding. Sometimes that's not the goal. That's solving the problems profitably is the goal. But when we do need the funding, sometimes your product is not the category you are in. I'll repeat it once more. Your product is not the category you are in. Kalau produk lu adalah tablet yang easily dissolve sebagai sabun, that's not your category. Your category is providing sustainable alternatives for your customers in home personal care. So it becomes bigger. And then you will have a roadmap. Aku akan banyak ngobrol ini nanti di modul 6, so look forward to that. But for now, we'll have to move to Rozar. I hope it kind of suits the pain for now, and we'll come back to this in the next 2 weeks. Don't worry. Rozar, your time to ask questions.
Yeah, thank you. Well, can't wait for the next 2 weeks then. Yeah. So terima kasih. Saya punya 2 pertanyaan, boleh ya? Singkat kok. Yang pertama karena tadi banyak Mbak Renata bilang soal komunikasi dengan para evangelist ya. Kita udah, tapi saya mau tanya sebenarnya keuntungan dan kerugian kalau misalnya kita bicara soal berapa harga yang mereka pengen bayarkan gitu. Itu apakah itu pertanyaan yang tabu atau itu harusnya kita bahas dengan evangelist itu, karena kami sedang struggling dengan masalah itu, dengan masalah pricing. Yang kedua mungkin karena tadi Mas Randy ya ngomong soal yang RISE, saya cuma mau tanya ini aja, ada nggak sih framework yang memposisikan berapa kriteria tadi ya, kayaknya ada impact dan lain-lain, tapi pakai bobot gitu, karena tadi saya melihat itu posisinya sejajar ya, posisi semua indikator ini sejajar gitu, ada reach, impact, confidence itu sejajar, ada nggak yang dibobotkan gitu, segitu aja sih, terima kasih.
Oke. Go on, Renata.
Oke, siap. Untuk harga yang paling gimana? Correct me if I'm wrong. Jadi abis ini ada session soal revenue modeling nggak sih?
Yes, habis ini akan ada session revenue modeling dari Mr. Jim Goudy, dia Global Head of Finance-nya Xendit. So we got you covered. No worries.
Ya, kayaknya paling tepat ngomong sama dia. Cuman I guess kayak sekarang kan nanti pasti di cover ya sama habis session ini soal kayak beberapa pricing option gitu kan, misalnya lihat dari cost terus ditambahin profit margin, atau lihat dari competition harganya berapa kayak gitu. I think maybe what you can try itu adalah coba get that estimate even before you ask the user gitu kan, get that estimate. Nah tapi in terms of enaknya itu ngomong ke user gimana adalah mungkin coba nanya yang habis ini deh gitu. Soalnya gue juga sebenarnya kalau misalnya you build quite a colleague ya relationship with your user, semestinya you can be quite honest gitu kan. Pasti dari semua customer lu juga pasti ada yang lu lebih deket kan. You can be quite honest with them like, hey, you're trying to create a sustainable business here, right? And you have this option gitu, kayak kira-kira pricingnya bisa begini menurut lu gimana? I think they should be quite open, and maybe an experience that I had is that waktu itu GCP itu pernah mau bikin produk gitu, dan gue di-include di salah satu early evangelist customer mereka gitu. Nah, mereka tuh open ke gue gitu, bilang kayak gue dari cuman harga operation tuh begini, dari harga customer tuh begini, menurut lu yang paling pas buat lu kayak gimana gitu. So there even seorang GCP pun kayak very open with that gitu. Tapi dia mungkin nggak ngomong ke semua early evangelist dia, sama mungkin orang yang dia bisa lebih ngomong frank, which is kayak gue ya mulai main bacot kan. Jadi kayak mungkin dia lebih comfortable gitu kan, nggak merasa itu tabu gitu kan. Jadi itu satu. Untuk kedua, bobot. Sebenarnya itu kan semestinya setiap faktor itu ada angkanya, Mas. Maksudnya bobot gimana ya, Mas ya? Sorry, aku kurang paham.
Ya, karena kan ada kayak tadi reach, impact, dan lain-lain ya. Misalnya saya pengen ada kayak lebih memprioritaskan reach gitu ya. Atau lebih
Oke.
Ya
Siap,
ada kriteria gitu ya.
Kayak weighted gitu ya, di weighted untuk beberapa.
Ada framework yang pakai weighted nggak gitu misalnya.
Siap. Sebenarnya menurut saya, Mas ya, ini personal juga nih ya, dari experience doang. Mas tuh bisa bikin suka-suka Mas sih sebenarnya. Ini kan aku jujur aja di company ngurusin beberapa pot ya, beberapa stream gitu. Nah, jadi ada beberapa tipe produk yang make sense buat benar-benar ikutin reach. Jadi kayak R kali impact kali confident per effort gitu kan. Nah, tapi ada juga pot yang R kali I per effort, terus baru semuanya dikali confident gitu. Jadi ada juga. Jadi gue ganti-gantiin aja tergantung dari seberapa confident tim gue juga, dari nggak cuman soal impact tapi juga effort. Jadi benar-benar tergantung Mas sih. Jadi mungkin Mas, tapi definitely kita nggak kepengen kayak gue aja sih biar apa yang gue mau kelihatan gitu ya. Juga ya. Ya maksudnya ada rational gitu. Rationalnya di itu adalah karena tim gue nggak cuman nggak confident soal impact-nya, tapi soal effort-nya juga nggak confident, kayak kayaknya sih 2 minggu tak, cuman gue nggak yakin gitu. Nah, kok kayak gitu, ya udah confident-nya kita kaliin ke semuanya aja gitu. Jadi make sure kayak you adjust the formula first gitu, baru lu implement ke situ. Kayak misalnya tadi Mas bilang impact, ya boleh aja. Yang penting work for your team and your company gitu. Yep. Justru itu paling bagus Mas. Berarti kan lu stress test dan you learn from it. Jadi that's good. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you Mas Roza pertanyaannya dan Renata atas responsnya. So tadi frameworks itu guidance ya, and how you want to adjust, how you want to make sure that it works for your context is depending on each of your company, karena bisa jadi konteksnya beda-beda. I hope this give you overview of what we can do and we can try in building the proper MVPs. Dan Renata, do you have any last statement before we move on to the next session?
Ada satu pertanyaan dari Mas Randy di chat tadi, nanya confident itu confident perusahaan kita atau confident dari customer kita. Nah, jadi Mas Randy, prioritization itu kan biasanya kita restore itu ke feature atau kayak biasanya hal yang kita mau build lah gitu. Dari semua hal nih 100 hal yang kita mau build, yang mana sih paling priority? Nah, jadi itu confident ke hal yang kita mau build itu gitu. Nah, perspektif confident-nya itu buat saya, gue mau bikin button present gitu ya, tulisannya present gitu misalnya. Nah, if confident terhadap button present, tapi confident-nya itu kayak tadi gue bilang gitu, karena tergantung formulanya kan. Kalau misalnya ini confident terhadap impact, berarti menurut gue seberapa confident gue kalau gue bilang impact, kalau gue kasih button present ini impact ke reach gue dan ke impact ke metrik gue itu tinggi gitu loh. Jadi lebih ke sana sih. Dan untuk kita bisa lebih sure ketika kita deciding itu, ada you talk to the user. Apakah menurut kira-kira ngomong ke user, user kalau misalnya gue bisa allow lu buat present ini, menurut lu lu bakal lebih lebih baik use case nggak sih pakai produk gue gitu kan? Kalau misalnya user bilang iya, terus habis itu apalagi kalau lu minta dia stack rank, terus dia lebih pilih feature itu banget dibanding even semua hal yang lu kerjain, ya berarti confidence lu lebih tinggi. Itu sih Mas. Yap. Semoga menjawab. Ya, statement ini semuanya kita belajar dan mungkin statement gue apa ya? Gini sih, I've talked to several people gitu, especially because of Gojek gitu. Gue have been very fortunate gitu to talk with a lot of brilliant people, not just within the team, tapi juga ketika misalnya ada event di luar atau kayak gimana. Dan most of the people that I found that are really either build impressive product kayak gitu semua, ada people who are not scared to fail. Itu satu. Gue tau semua orang udah ngomongin ini. Cuman it's still very uncomfortable to actually kayak ketika lu fail lu masih kayak gila gue gagal gitu, masih nggak enak kan rasanya painful, gitu tapi painful gitu, tapi itu satu hal yang sama. Dan kedua, mereka itu nggak pernah stop baca buku sih gitu menurut gue. Kayak mereka selalu learn new things. Lu nanya mereka, lu baca apa, pasti mereka baca something yang baru gitu. Jadi orangnya tuh bener-bener hungry dan kayak kepengen belajar terus buat improve gitu. Jadi I think definitely the same thing with me juga, kayak maksudnya gue juga masih belajar gitu, kayak gue is nowhere close to those people, tapi at least with knowing that they have those habits, itu bagus gitu buat kita buat always improving gitu.
Yeah, so this is the beginning. So I'm here today to talk about revenue models, specifically for startup growth. I'll go through some contents here, which revenue model would suit your business. I'll try and keep this generic. There are so many different revenue models to think of, but these are kind of 5 that are the most kind of popular ones. And hopefully you can, recognize this type of model for your business. I'll also mention the key drivers. What are the kind of things you have to think about when you're creating a revenue model? When to monetize. So I'm sure that you guys will, you'll be on a growth path. At some point, you guys will need to start thinking about when to actually start monetizing, when to become profitable. And then I'll also talk about the differences between B2b versus B2C. And then I'll mention the factors that will lead to profitability. So first of all, what is a revenue model? So essentially, a revenue model is a framework and it's a strategy on how a business generates revenue and is part of the overall business model. So what this means is that you guys will have a business model that you've probably given to investors, to various incubators. The revenue model is actually part of your business model. It's your pathway to making revenue, and then in turn turning that into profitability. The next point, a revenue model will help decide which revenue source to prioritize, which customer segments to target, and how to price. So again, your revenue model is your overall strategy. How do you price your products? How do you identify revenue sources? And I'll come on to this later about what is the difference between a revenue model and a revenue stream. So your revenue model and your framework will be a collection of all these different revenue streams. In this model as well, or in this framework, you're going to talk about which customers you're going to target, how you've priced the product, and then essentially which revenue model you're going to choose, to start getting revenue for your business. The framework as well will also talk about how your business creates value, and then this value that you create for your customers, this is what's converted into revenue. Because if you're not making value for your customer, then no one's going to pay for your service or for your product. So you need to create value, and this value creation will sit within your revenue model or in your revenue framework. As I mentioned, revenue streams. So revenue streams is actually, well, like you could have one revenue stream, you could have 100 revenue streams. but all these revenue streams are sitting within your revenue model. So essentially, again, your revenue model is lining out all these different revenue streams that you will have. And then finally, you need to understand as well, and this will again be part of the model, you need to understand the cost levers, because at the end of the day, your revenue or your pricing has to cover your costs. What are your actual revenue drivers? Again, where do you create value? Who are the customers you're going to be targeting? Obviously, there's a lot of different segmentation you can come up with. There's individuals, there's companies, and then within companies, you can talk about SMEs, you can talk about multinational corporations, you can also talk about enterprise customers. So I'll go into that a little bit later on. So these are the 5 main models that I was mentioning before. Like I said, they're very generic, but hopefully you can see a model within this that you can identify with. But there are so many models that, there is some research required, but these are just the main ones. So first of all, we have the production and manufacturing model. So in the production model, you will actually create a product that you sell to a customer for a certain value. Now, within this kind of product, you're going to have things like, labor costs, you could have materials, or, this could actually be like a project that you're doing. At the end of the day, you're basically saying, here's my product, and you're going to give me, an amount of funds or amount of revenue for this actual product that you've created. It could be something you can touch. It could actually be like a service, some sort of consultancy. But then in the manufacturing model, where you are producing something, you're going to have a lot of different aspects of costs. You're going to have labor, you're going to have materials, there's going to be assets like equipment, and the resulting product or good that you produce, you're actually going to sell to your customer. So the key to this is really, what is your cost? Like, what cost did you incur to actually create this product? There's depending on how complicated the business is, this could be quite a tough thing to do. It's not as easy as what people think, especially if you, for example, have a lot of different complex processes to then put into your product. So it can be quite a difficult thing to do, but I'll go into various kind of models that you can do or costing you can do later. There's also rental. So I'm sure you guys know about renting cars, renting shoes from online stores. So where your business actually has a revenue driver that is, for example, like a tangible good. So it could be a good, it could actually be a service, but service is maybe more for like you would have a fee for this, but you might have a good or an asset that you can rent out to a customer. So this is really good for companies, for startups who want to create recurring revenues. And this is something that's very appealing to investors, actually, which again, I'll get onto later. So this is a good way for you guys to create recurring revenue on your value creation drivers. Also, if you've produced something that is very hard to recreate, but also very hard to make again and again and again, it's actually better for you guys to say, okay, this is my product or this is my good. You can rent it for me and you'll give it back at the end of the period. You can also charge them to do the maintenance. So in effect, you're actually passing all of the costs on to your customer as well as renting the product, because you do not want to keep building and building and building this product over and over again. And then the third one is where, again, this is probably more for project management or like consultancy cost. But if you have a service or a product, you can actually just charge a fee for this. So again, you would factor in your labor costs and any resources that you guys have incurred to produce this service, sorry, to cover the cost of your business. Because it can be quite ad hoc, like it could be projects, for example, you need to kind of factor in, okay, what happens when the project ends? Can you still pay your staff? Can you still pay your overheads? So, just to be careful that this is not like a recurring revenue, which is, for example, subscription or rental. So you need to kind of factor in, okay, can I survive the entire year or like 3 years with just this kind of model? And then the final two is actually probably the most popular ones. At Xendit, we help companies do payments. So this is a very easy method for us to pass on costs or pass on revenue to our customer. This is the most common indirect method. Essentially, you provide a service and the customer pays you. So every time we do a transaction for a customer, that customer just pays us like 5,000 IDR per transaction. The benefit of this is that customers are actually, they can understand this. You just say to them, okay, for every transaction you guys do, just, we'll just pay 5,000 IDR. This can also be tweaked a little bit. You can actually do things like tier pricing. You can do hybrid pricing. So tier pricing is, for example, you say to your customer, okay, for the first 1,000 transactions, you pay me 5,000. For the next 1,000 after that, you pay me 4,000 IDR. So it's a really good method to kind of use to make things simple for your customers, but also to, potentially say, okay, we'll make things better for you if you do more and more volumes. Again, this kind of gets customers like hooked into your business. And then the last one that's quite a generic one, I'm sure everyone's got this. Netflix is the perfect example. If you're producing some sort of service to a customer, they can actually like prepay it over time. So for example, over 1 year, they can start prepaying a month early for some sort of service you're providing for them. Now, the two huge benefits of this that's really important for investors is recurring revenue. So whenever investors want to see your revenue profile, one thing they'll normally ask for is, hey, what is your recurring revenue? Because to them, this means that you're basically guaranteeing revenue for maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. At the same time, this also guarantees a longer customer lifetime. So what this means is that the customers that you onboard for your business, it means that you're going to keep them for say 1 year or 2 years or 3 years instead of maybe 1 or 2 months. So this again gives investors a lot of confidence that you guys are building a long sustainable business. But just a heads up that this is only really profitable if you have a large customer base. So, if you have like 5 customers and you're charging $5 per customer, you're not gonna, make much profit over the period. So it's really better for businesses that have already established, and then you can maybe come out with a new product. Like for example, Xendit, we have a new product called Zen Platform. So we already have, thousands of customers already at Xendit. So we've said, okay, this is a new service, just pay us a subscription for this service. And to them, it seems like they're not paying a lot of money, but actually we're guaranteeing ourselves like X amount of profit per month or per year. So it's another way to kind of add in additional revenue drivers for a business. So what I'll do is I'll just talk about the key drivers to each model, things to consider. Identify 3 kind of main drivers for your revenue model. I think number 1 is the cost levers and drivers. So at the end of the day, you're looking to make a profit. You're looking to become profitable at some point in the business, in the lifetime of the business. So you need to ensure that your revenue model is covering your cost and is leading to a path of profitability. Very simple, whatever is outgoing, you have to cover with your ingoing. But then my next point, it's actually not as easy as what people think. There is things to consider, such as cost of goods sold. The cost of goods sold is the cost that you use to produce the service that you're providing. This can be easy. It can be quite hard to look at, but it's Xendit, for example. It's actually quite simple. It's our banking fees. But for other parts of the business, it can be quite hard to decide, okay, what actually is a cost of goods sold and what is just general operational expense. Equipment cost, for example, is a really good one. If you buy a piece of equipment for say $100,000, that cost is actually, that $100,000 is not your cost of producing a good. What you would do, I don't want to get too much into finance and accounting, but you would normally amortize your equipment over say 5 to 10 years. So let's say this $100,000 equipment was amortized over 5 years, then you're actually incurring a cost of $20,000 per year, not $100,000. So you need to kind of be aware of the different types of costs and how things are recognized. This also applies to revenue, which I'll get to later in the next point. But then just to wrap up the cost levers and drivers, you can do like advanced calculations and modeling to determine what pricing you need to set. So for example, at Xendit, we have this really big complicated model that covers everything from average cost to customer segmentation to operational expense. I know you guys are in the startup phase, so you're not going to have that expertise right now, but as you do progress through your lifetime, you're going to want to start considering to do kind of more complicated modeling. And I've thrown into here like ABC costing and cost-based pricing. Those are kind of two of the models that can potentially be used. But there's actually a lot of models out there that can also be used as well. So you really need to kind of decide when is the right time to, think about these kind of calculations, when to employ like an actual kind of CFO or a finance manager to get you to that next stage. So the next point is revenue streams. Now, as I said, revenue streams is actually one source of income, and that one revenue stream will be part of your revenue model. So you need to figure out, where does your business actually make value for a customer? So like I said, at Xendit, we do payments for our customers. So where we add value is when we actually do a transaction for a customer. So we charge on a per transaction basis. So, I mean, it sounds very, very easy, but, sometimes some businesses actually find it hard to decide, hey, where do we actually add value? We're creating, or we're doing this super cool thing for the environment, but where are we actually where is our actual value creation? So that is just something to consider as well. And I'm sure you guys know your business very, very well. But like I said in the previous point, you need to understand your business in comparison to value creation as well as the overall market. So you might want to look at other companies that are doing the same thing and say, okay, these guys are doing this revenue stream. We could probably do the same thing. The overall market also, like, who are the players? Who are the customers? What do the customers want to be charged in terms of pricing, in terms of methodology? Do they want to get one invoice per month? Do they want to be paying a subscription each month? Do they want to just pay, one large cost for a project? So it does take a bit of, research and kind of knowing what's going on in the marketplace before you kind of decide how you, create a revenue stream and how you do a revenue model. And like I mentioned before, you need to know how to recognize revenue. At the end of the day, hopefully you guys are going to be making big businesses. You're going to have to start recognizing when revenue can be recognized and when it cannot be recognized. 2 or 3 examples here is transactional. Very simple. When you do a transaction, you're recognizing revenue. So you can recognize that revenue on your revenue line in your profit and loss account. If you have a subscription model, it's probably likely that your customers are going to be paying 1, 2, 3 months in advance. So what you would actually do is you would not recognize that revenue at the month that they pay. You would recognize that revenue over a period of time. This is also the same with project work. If you're doing a project for a customer and you bill them like $50,000, you're not allowed to actually recognize that $50,000 straight away into your profit and loss. It depends on the stages of the project. So say stage 1 is doing the plans and you can charge $10,000. You can recognize that on your profit and loss. Then the next stage will be like building the product. And then you can, again, recognize revenue. So they might pay like that $50,000 straight away, but you're not allowed to recognize that revenue until the actual work is done. It's kind of like finance and accounting concepts here, which I don't want to get into right now. And then finally, your customer profile. You really need to know who your customers are. And I'll do a bit of a deep dive into this later. But you need to know who the customers are. Are they big? Are they small? What model suits them? Do they want invoices? Do they want like subscription? Do they want rental? What about the segmentation? Are they SMEs? Are they enterprises? Your potential path to profitability, and this is the case with Xendit, is that the companies that we're looking at can actually get us profitable quicker or slower. I'll tell you why in the next slide, but just to give you a heads up that there are a lot of things to consider. And then finally, as I mentioned before, what do your customers actually want? Do they want subscription? Do they want transactional? Depending on the size of the company, they might even want tier pricing. They might want discounts. They might want a hybrid, which would be maybe transactional, and then a different model of like maybe a percentage of the value of the project you're doing. So you might say, okay, if you're charging like per kilogram, for the first 100 kilogram of product you produce, you charge like $100. Then for the next 100 or 1,000 kilograms you make, you could then charge a percentage of the fee that you incurred to make that product. That's what we're finding at Xendit, that these large companies are coming to us and saying, okay, we want to do hybrid pricing. Not so much in Indonesia, actually more in the Philippines, but just to be aware that this is something that some customers do like to have. So what I'll move on to now is, what is that kind of trigger to start monetizing? I think you could probably guess what these kind of, the first one is anyway. What do your investors want? Xendit, we have a lot of really big investors in America and in Southeast Asia. They will be the ones that actually tell you, okay, now is the time to start thinking about profit, or at least revenue and profitability. So as an example, they will actually, you'll start to report to investors on a monthly basis, or like 6 months or every year. And one of the things they'll probably ask for is, what is your cash burn? Cash burn is your average like money out divided by, well, you divide the number of funds in your bank by this cash burn. So let's just say that your cash burn is 4 years. So that means in 4 years, you're going to run out of money. Your investors at that point are going to be like, yeah, it's fine. You've got 4 years before you run out of cash. You might have to do a fundraise. Just focus on growth. Once it gets to probably 2 years, your investors are going to be thinking, okay, now's the time to start making money. Now's the time to start plotting that path to profitability. So in the beginning, the main target is all about setting up the business and growing. After a certain amount of time or a certain amount of cash burn, they're going to start to come to you and say, okay, now is the time to start thinking about a revenue model, start to think about profitability. This is something we do. The next part is called benchmarking. This is something we do at Xendit quite a lot. Obviously, the payment gateway space, there's a lot of players in the market. In Indonesia, there is, there's Doku, there's Mitrans. Internationally, there's like Stripe, TransferWise, for example. So a lot of different players. So what we do is we actually compare ourselves to these different players. So let's just say that we're moving $1 billion each month. How does our revenue compare to their revenue? If one company is doing the same amount of transactions, $1 billion, but they're making 5 million per month, whereas we're only making 1, that's an indication that we're not doing something right. There's some sort of pricing that we're missing out on. There's some sort of revenue stream that we're maybe not doing. So it is good to compare yourself to some competitors, or at least companies who are similar to yourself, that are maybe like 5 or 10 years down the line, so that you can have a benchmark to compete against, or compare against, sorry. Now at Xendit, I just want to give you a bit of a breakdown on what we've seen at Xendit. So in the beginning, and even recently during our Series B, which we raised, you might have seen it in the news or something. The theme is growth, and the theme is still growth. Even during meetings, the headline number that we all look at is the volume of transactions that we have actually processed. This, like I said, is a dollar amount. It could be 1 billion, it could be 2 billion. But investors are starting now to kind of say, okay, how well are you converting value into revenue? So the way that Xendit keeps an eye on how we convert value into revenue is we actually take our revenue and we divide it by the number of transactions we've done for that month. And then we have a metric that we can compare against with other players in the market. And then our investors will say, okay, yeah, this metric's looking quite good. Keep going the way you're going. Or if it drops below a certain level, they'll probably say, okay, guys, time to start thinking about different pricing. So that's how Xendit has kind of managed this kind of trade-off between growth and revenue. I mean, Xendit now, we're getting to that stage. We've been going for 5-6 years. We're starting to really grow. So now we're starting to really think about how we start to convert this, value creation, this revenue driver, into actual revenue. So yeah, that's just a few kind of kickoff points when you want to start to think about revenue models. So what are the differences between B2B and B2Cs? I think at the end of the day, transactional is the easiest. It's also the most popular and the most direct. Again, Xendit, whenever we do a transaction for a customer, we charge them per transaction. At Zalora, once we did a transaction, someone bought a t-shirt, we charge them for that transaction. So I think no matter what you end up, who your customer is, if it's a corporation, if it's a business, or if it's a consumer, transactional will always be a kind of favorable model. But moving down from that, we have rental for the B2B space. Companies are going to be, they're probably not going to want to pay a large one-off fee to buy a specialist bit of product, but they are willing to rent from you. So this is where the difference is between B2B and B2C, whereas a B2C, instead of paying $1,000 up front, or like the yearly subscription for Netflix or some sort of streaming program, they'll just say to you, okay, we'll just charge you $5 per month, and you just keep the revenue coming in. Basically, keep making payments of $5 per month. Like I said, for a business, this is very good for recurring revenue, but it depends on the profile. Consumers will prefer subscription, and then B2Bs, because they're larger businesses, they're going to prefer rentals. For consumers as well, direct pricing is usually what they're going to want. Because consumers do not have large teams, they're less likely to negotiate. So if you say to them, or Xendit says to an individual, we're going to charge you 1,000 or 5,000 IDR per transaction, it's very unlikely they're going to say, we want half price, because they'll just accept it at face value. Whereas with a business, businesses have commercial teams, they've got finance teams, they've got legal teams. They're going to probably come back and say, hey guys, we want to have tier pricing, or we want to have hybrid pricing, where we get charged on a transaction basis, then we get charged on a percentage basis. So I just highlighted a couple of points here. So B2Bs, they are going to want to negotiate. They're going to want to shop around. So they're going to actively look for the lowest price. So you kind of have to juggle between low pricing, but also you want to, have as high revenue as you possibly can. So if your product is very good, so I mean, at Xendit, our product is very good. We are actually able to negotiate higher prices because of our service. But from time to time, customers will say, oh, you know what, I want to go with this cheaper alternative, even though they're not as good as us. We do sometimes negotiate with them. Following on from this, like I said, these larger B2Bs will have commercial teams, they'll have legal teams, they'll have financial teams. So they're going to be able to actually deep dive into contracts and say, okay, this pricing is in here, I want to change this, or something similar to this kind of concept. And then, like I said, they're going to expect better deals on volumes, because our big customers, they will do millions of transactions per year. So they're going to come to us and say, okay, guys, like Xendit, can we do a deal? If we give you X amount of volume, will you give us a cheaper price? And then on the flip side, B2Cs, I'm a consumer. I want things to be very easy. I don't want to have to negotiate. I just want to pay and then get my service. So B2Cs want things to be very easy. For sure, there's going to be things like 11/11 deals, 12/12, but that is like one-off marketing events. Usually, B2Cs, they just want to have one transaction, one price. Obviously, individuals do not have commercial teams, so there's going to be less negotiation. And it's very unlikely that you'll have the opportunity to do hybrid pricing with an individual, because like I said, it's highly unlikely that an individual is going to do millions of transactions per year. It's more than likely an individual is going to have maybe 50 per year. So yeah, really, you're not going to be able to do like hybrid pricing. So that's the kind of differences. The final bit is probably the bit that you're probably most interested in, like how do you get to profitability? For me, it's these four kind of aspects. And I've touched on a lot of these already. Customer segmentation. Your customer segmentation is actually going to be quite a large influence on your margins. I'll explain why. So at Xendit, we have two types of businesses that we service, enterprise and SMEs. So enterprise customers tend to be large multinational corporations They've got over 300 people, 500 people, and their margins or their price that we charge is actually usually lower than what we charge SMEs. SMEs are usually like 100 people, 50 people. So because these companies have large teams, they can actually negotiate with us directly, and they will look around for the best price. Whereas SMEs, and this is also the same with individuals, they're less likely to come back to us and say, hey, Xendit, we want a better deal. They're just going to be like, okay, yeah, we'll take this as long as you provide a good service. So as part of Xendit's long-term path to profitability, we're actually focusing on SMEs. So it's great to have your enterprise customers like, you know, like TikTok or these other bigger companies like Netflix or, you know, MasterCard. We actually want to target SMEs because we know that in 5 years' time, we're going to have a quicker path to profitability if we focus on SMEs. So that's what I mean by customer segmentation. Really understand the drivers behind each segmentation and go for the one that's going to give you that long-term path to profitability. The whole part of this talk is the correct revenue model. Choosing the right model based on what your customers want and how to cover your cost. So it could be one model, it could be transactional, it could be subscription, it could be, you know, fee for service. As long as you're covering your costing, then you're going to eventually become profitable. There are obviously other ways to become profitable by decreasing your cost, which I'll come to later. But you need to make sure that your revenue model that you're choosing is actually going to cover the cost of what you're incurring to produce your service. Now margins. So basically margins is your revenue minus your cost to produce this product or make this product. I'll be honest, when I joined Zalora, now Zalora is one of the biggest e-commerce companies in Southeast Asia. They actually found it very, very hard to know what their margins were. And then when I joined Xendit, no one knew what our margins were. And I looked into our biggest products and I soon realized that we were not making any margin for our biggest products. So I spoke to the project managers and I said, hey guys, this is what we're doing. This is our margin. And now our biggest products are now making margins of 40%, 50%. So you really need to know what your margins are. Determine what goes into making your product and then finding out if you're making a gross profit and then a net profit. You need to be able to forecast and say, okay, this is our margins. This is the various assumptions that we have. So it could be like average pricing per customer, it could be average cost per transaction, and then have a 5-year plan that shows that you're becoming profitable and how you're going to get there. So for Xendit, we're focusing on SMEs, and we're also focusing on decreasing our costs so that we are having, our net profit is going to be positive instead of negative. And then finally, economies of scale. Now, this is a bit of an economic finance and accounting concept, but look at your business, especially your OPEX. OPEX is your kind of background cost. So that could be advertising, headcount, it could be cleaning costs, it could be rent. Really look at your OPEX and just see where you can achieve more with less. You can also do this with your cost of goods sold as well. So I like to kind of keep my teams lean. So more headcount doesn't necessarily mean more revenue. So if you have a lot of manual transactions or a lot of manual work, instead of hiring more and more and more people, look to perhaps do automation projects where you're reducing the manual labor that you're doing for producing a service. Or you can speak with your OPEX providers. It could be like a data team, for example, and you could you could maybe outsource your data team, or you can hire in-house data teams, for example, to really decrease your costs. So these are just a number of ways that Xendit's kind of been looking to achieve this economies of scale. And then this is how, this is kind of the 4 main ways that we are achieving profitability. And I do think this kind of comes across for all the businesses, especially kind of e-commerce, startup businesses, fintech companies as well. Is your margins, is achieving economies of scale, and really understanding your customers and getting the correct revenue model to, get as much margin, get as much revenue as possible, and to keep costs as low as possible as well. So that's my kind of, pointers for this this talk. Thanks a lot for listening, and yeah, I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the great presentation. It was very impactful.
Thanks.
Yeah, we have several questions already coming in. We have Randy first from Ravelware. Please.
Okay, check.
Hey, Randy.
Is my sound clear?
Yeah, all good.
Hi, Jim.
Yes.
Hey, Randy.
Yes, okay, thank you very much for your insightful presentation. So I have a question regarding the revenue model. So in my case, but I think it's everyone case. There are overhead cost component to be accumulated into the total cost before we try to mark up our product or service. Because at the end of the day, in order to make our company grow, we need profits, right?
Yeah.
But if you are in the red ocean market, there are comparisons to do price benchmarking. However, if we are in the blue ocean market, usually the benchmarking sometimes are not really straightforward. Regarding that, do you have any method or are there any framework to make sure whether the overhead cost per submission or per transaction is just right?
Yeah,
not
sure.
so high or not so low?
Yeah, yeah. Again, I'll take Xendit as an example. So, in Indonesia, the payment gateway space is actually very secretive. So I actually struggled a lot to find comparisons with other companies like Xendit. So what I had to do was I actually just had to, I looked at companies like PayPal, Stripe, in Europe. There's a lot of other different companies with the same kind of profile. And, at the end of the day, Xendit wants to become like a listed company. We want to IPO at some point. So what I did is I actually looked back at these companies, their numbers over the years. So I said, okay, PayPal listed in 2006. So I looked at each year in how they actually grew year on year to then compare ourselves to Xendit. So I said, okay, once they achieve this amount of revenue or this amount of transactions, that is the time for Xendit to become profitable and potentially do an IPO. So in terms of your question, how can I compare with an industry or a market that isn't really, there's no comparison? I would just try and find a market that is fairly similar. It doesn't have to be in Indonesia. I think the world is so big that I guarantee some other companies done the same thing at some point, maybe in America or something. So like I said, Indonesia, very secretive for the fintech environment, but in the US and in Europe, there's so many fintechs. So you just need to kind of do the research, I think. Try and kind of say, okay, this company is fairly similar to your company, and then start to do the comparison. We're doing the same thing, actually. We're starting to kind of say, okay, what is our tech cost? Like Xendit is obviously a fintech company. So we're trying to determine if our tech cost is in line with the same companies, because we don't want to spend all of our money on tech. We want to spend money on sales. We want to spend money to get more revenue. So that's kind of how Xendit's doing it at the moment. We're just comparing with competitors. Doesn't have to be like for like, apples to apples. It can be apples to oranges. Not apples to broccoli, because that's like a whole different thing. But you know what I mean? Like apples to oranges is kind of similar, different, same market, but slightly different. So that would be my advice.
Right, fantastic. So try to find your category, even though it's not head-to-head, and see the breakdown of that. And especially
exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I think Zalora, again, a really good one. There was no kind of Zalora in Southeast Asia until Zalora really came along. But because the company was held by a European holding company, they could actually compare to what was going on in Europe. Actually, the way that they did their financial reports was all in euros, because they wanted to compare, hey, what's like Amazon doing in Europe, or what is, I'm trying to think of another company that's similar in Europe, like ASOS, for example. All these similar companies. So Zalora actually priced their products, not to obviously the consumer, but internally, they price their products in euros. So yeah, that's how bigger companies do it as well. And how Xendit, we're like a medium-sized company now. So we just kind of try and find that company that we can benchmark against and try and compare, yeah.
Right, fantastic. We have next question from Irene from Turtle Safe.
Hi Jim, how's it going? I've got a few questions actually. So first of all, that my company actually we manufacture household cleaning products in effervescent tablet. So our revenue model is manufacturing but also I'm also considering the another revenue model, which is subscription, because we all know that the nature of cleaning products that we have to purchase it on a regular basis, like nightly or like monthly basis. So I'm considering like two revenue model in this stage actually. So my question would be, how do we know we have adapted the right revenue model? That's the first question. And I've got another question actually on the forecasting, because you mentioned briefly about forecasting on your margin. And I actually got a meeting with PMN. So it's like a state-owned VC corporation. So I have to do things. So can you briefly walk us through on the process of forecasting from your point of view?
Yeah, sure. I think the second question can be quite a long answer, so I'll tackle the first one. So how do you know the revenue model is correct? No, actually, I'll do the second question first. So yeah, in terms of what we did at Xendit, right, we know exactly what our revenue drivers are. It's doing transactions. We know exactly the cost per transaction on an average basis. So let's just say, for argument's sake, we do 1 million transactions per month. We know exactly the cost per transaction on an average basis. Let's say it's zero. Let's say it's 20 cents. So we have an idea on our cost, and then below that we have all our OPEX. So we have headcount, we have tech costs, we have data costs, we have like obviously salaries, we have like depreciation of equipment, we have our taxes, we have our interest payments, all that kind of stuff. So we know exactly our levers as well. So for every dollar that we process, we know exactly how much data costs we have to spend to produce that. For tech costs, like AWS, Amazon, the Amazon data service, we know exactly how much like tech costs we will spend for every single dollar we kind of process. So I would call this like a kind of bottom-up forecast where we know what our costing is, we know what drives each dollar that we process for customers. So we're very quickly able to put together some sort of like financial model to say, okay, if we do 1 million or 1 billion transactions per month or per year, how does that translate into our operational cost? So, so we just basically take all of these breakdown of costs and then multiply it by the amount of transactions we do. Now, obviously, there's fixed costs to this. For example, headcount. I mean, you have to pay your salaries to your staff. Or rent, you have to pay your rent. But for some costs, they are variable. So we split it between variable and fixed costing. So we have this like breakdown basically of all our costing. And now we say, okay, we've done 1 billion transactions per year. Let's charge 0.3 or 30 cents, right? So we just do 1 billion transactions times by 30 cents. That's our revenue. And then we just basically plug this into a financial model. And then we say, okay, we're making money, great. Let's keep the pricing as it is. Or, okay, we're still losing money, so we need to increase the price. So we do quite a deep dive, extensive model to kind of figure out if we're making the right, pricing decisions. And that kind of feeds into this first question, right? Because you're mentioning subscription. Depending on how many people are going to pay for that subscription, it could be the right decision, it could be the wrong decision, but I'm not actually sure until I kind of see what your cost breakdown is. For example, like what is your fixed cost? Because like I said, you have to pay for rent, you have to pay for the rent of machinery. I think you're manufacturing cleaning products, right? So you have machines, I imagine, or you have some sort of process. You have to pay for the rent of that machinery, for example. So you have to kind of factor in all these different costings, fixed and variable. Plug that into your financial model and say, okay, if I sold 1 million cleaning products and I times that by 30 cents, will I cover my costings? That's essentially how Xendit does it. To be honest, we have a fairly big finance team that can do these kind of things, but for yourself, I'm imagining it's quite a small team. It might be quite hard, but try as best as possible to understand your whole process. Have a good idea on how many subs you can actually obtain, how many products you can actually produce and sell, and then get a good idea on your costing profile, your operational expense. Look at your fixed costs and your variable costs, and then that way you'll be able to build some sort of model that will be from top to bottom, like understandable for investors. Investors are going to want to know why, right? They're going to want to, when you talk to investors, they're thinking, okay, you've got this operational expense line. What is the whole point behind this line? What's driving it? Is it fixed? Is it variable? For every product you create, does this go up or down? I would be ready to field a lot of these different questions. Whenever I go into a board meeting, and they're asking for like numbers, I need to know the story behind that number. Don't just say $1 million. They're gonna be like, okay, but why $1 million? Okay, it's because we're producing X amount of product for X amount of price. That would be my advice on manufacturing products. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Jim.
No worries, thanks.
Fantastic. Next, we have two more questions actually. I hope
Sure.
we still have enough time. So one is from Carolina from Pasar. Time is yours.
Hi, Carolina.
Hey, Jim. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, I can.
Thank you so much for going through your presentation. My name is Carolina from Pasar, and I have a couple of questions here for you. The first one would be, what would you recommend in figuring out what is the right time period for subscriptions for our customers, whether it's like weekly, monthly, or annually? Obviously, it's not going to be effective to kind of like dissect every single one with like week by week or everything, but like how do you kind of like find the balance? And the second part is that for subscriptions for a product, how do you decide on pricing for the product to achieve a break-even point? Ideally, we want it to be 12 to 24 months. Should you calculate how long you need? Should you calculate from the perspective of how long do you need to achieve the break-even point, or achieving target customer base? Like if someone wants to achieve like 1,000 customer, basically where do we begin?
Yeah, maybe one caveat on this. I've never really worked for a business that has subscriptions. I've mostly worked in e-commerce, and it's like transactional. However, I mean, I've got my ideas, right? So I kind of need to know what consumers want. If I'm a consumer, I don't want to have to pay you every week. I want to pay you monthly at a minimum, and max at a yearly basis, right? So I think it depends. If you want to have subscriptions that are giving you recurring revenue, I would have it on a yearly basis, because that way you're kind of locking in your customer for at least a year. If you were then to go to an investor and say, hey, I've got this amount of recurring revenue for 2022, they're going to be very impressed with this. They're going to think, okay, so these guys have guaranteed revenue. They're going to be able to kind of, at some point, keep those subscriptions going and going and going. So that at some point you're going to have like millions upon millions of revenue, and you can cover your costings, etc. So that's how I would kind of look at the first question in terms of recommending the subs. If it's weekly, monthly, or yearly, I would, as a consumer, I would be like, I don't want to pay weekly. I'd rather pay like every 6 months, maybe, or every year. And then from an investor side, or like if I was talking to an investor and I was to say, hey, YC or GGV or whoever, we've locked in 6 months of revenue. We've locked in 1 year of revenue. Customer lifetime is 1 year or 2 years. I mean, you probably don't realize this, but investors will look at these things, these metrics. So one metric that we're always asked about is what is the average lifespan of our customers? If it's 2 years, super impressive. If it's 3 months, they're like, oh my God, these guys are useless. They can't keep their customers. Their sales team is not good. So yeah, I would also, yeah, so that's my kind of like advice on this. I would try and lock in as long as possible, from an investor side as well. And then from a consumer side, like I said, I don't want to pay weekly, I want to pay monthly, or I want to pay every 6 months or every year.
But I guess, I mean, I understand if it's from a business owner perspective or even like from an investor perspective, but from a customer perspective, sometimes it's rather daunting to kind of like pay for a fund, for example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's like rent in Jakarta. You pay 1 year up front, whereas in England, in Scotland, where I'm from, I pay monthly. Even though I've lived in Jakarta now for many years. Yeah, it's very daunting. I agree. But you know, yeah, find that trade-off. Like if it's 6 months or even 3 months is actually not so bad. Paying every quarter is not the end of the world. But I would definitely try and avoid weekly and also monthly. Yeah. And for the next point, yeah, do you want to charge the price that's going to cover you for the next year or 2 years to then break even? Again, from what I know from the consumer, either individuals or a business, they hate it when prices go up. They actually want prices to go down. So what we're finding at Xendit is that our average pricing is going more and more like down because customers are now starting to become smarter. They want the best deal, right? So if I was, sitting in your team deciding how to price this kind of product for the subscription, I would probably try and go as high as possible and just say, we're going to charge you $10 per month or 200,000 rupiah per month, right? And then in 3 months, decrease the price by like 10,000 rupiah. In their eyes, they're gonna be like, whoa, wow, these guys are great. They're reducing pricing. So that's what we do at Xendit. Actually, we start off quite high. Our highest can be like 7,500 per transaction. It can be as low as 1,000 per transaction. But if we start high and then go low, customers are gonna be like, oh, great, Xendit, it's amazing, good customer service. Whereas if we start low and go high, they're gonna be like, damn, Xendit, we don't like these guys. We're gonna go to mid-trans.
Like underestimating and over-delivering. Yeah,
exactly. And one thing I like to say is like aim for the stars, but clear the trees. So aim high, but then if a customer does come back and the feedback comes back, oh, this is way too high, then you can say, okay, tell you what, I'll lower it down by 1,000. But at some point, yeah, you would need to kind of understand, is this price you're charging per month or every 6 months, is it enough to actually cover your costing? At some point, once you're past that kind of growth stage, or you hit that point where you need to start thinking about profitability, then you need to start thinking, okay, this is all of our OPEX, this is all of our cost of goods sold. Now feed this into some sort of financial model, and then at the end of the day, are you breaking even? So that would be kind of, if I was doing a business that was doing subs, I would probably forget about break even for the first 2 or 3 years. I would say, right, let's just hook in as many customers as possible. Let's focus on growth and let's focus on getting the best price possible. And as your business grows and grows, you can then start to decrease pricing. Economies of scale kicks in, you become better at your job, more efficient, your sales team's more efficient, your conversion rates are better, your churn rates are going to be lower, hopefully. And then you can start to really think about, okay, now's the time to start thinking about OPEX and break-even points. So that would be like how I would approach this. But like I said, I've never worked for a company that purely does subscriptions. Xendit does subscriptions, but it's not our main revenue model. Our main one is like transactional cost as well as service fees. So, but that'd be my approach. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Yeah, no worries.
Fantastic. We have 5 more minutes and 1 more question. So Rosa.
Yeah, I can keep it brief. Yeah. Hi, Jim. So thankfully, your answers to Carolina's questions already cover most of my questions.
Okay, great.
But I got one left then, maybe a small one. Could you recommend to us like a technique or model or a method to set up a pricing like for a service?
Yeah, there's so many pricing models out there, to be honest. I mentioned ABC pricing. I mentioned cost plus base. So what's the service actually? That might give me more insight into what's the best way to do it.
Yeah, we're actually a waste pickup service targeting lower economic
Okay.
households. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Again, a business I'd love to know more about, but I've never been involved in. Yeah, that's a tricky one. Again, it's understanding your cost. I'm very detail orientated as like my background is finance and accounting. I know exactly everything about Xendit. Like, ask me a question about Xendit, I'll know the number. So for me, again, if I was going to be doing this waste service pickup for lower economic like families and households, like, what is the cost of your trucks? What is the cost of your labor? What is the cost of like you're renting your offices? And then I would do it from bottom up. So there's like a top down version and there's a bottom up version. Top down is where you say, okay, consumer, this is my price. But you're aiming for, I imagine, maybe NGOs, governments, or like, lower income, like, I don't know, maybe kampongs or villages or whatever, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're not going to be able to do top down. You're going to have to do bottom up. So you're going to have to go, okay, what is my OPEX? What is my headcount? How much income can I maybe get from the government for like helping out these families, or like what NGO, maybe an NGO could actually help you out. Factor that in as well, and then you can then build your like kind of income statement, your profit and loss from the bottom up, and then you'll know exactly, okay, this is the exact amount of revenue that we have to start getting before we can start covering costs. And then you can actually start to think, okay, we're doing 50,000 households, and if we were to charge a sub of 100,000 per month, you can actually decide, does that cover your costs or not? If it doesn't, okay, let's do something else. Let's maybe try a service model. Maybe let's try a commission model based on the weight of trash that you guys pick up. So I would first of all understand your OPEX, like I said, your trucks, your headcount, your salary, all that kind of stuff. And then you can probably decipher yourself, okay, this is the model we want to go with, because this will be the one that covers your cost. Yeah, again, that would be my advice. Yeah, I mean, that's how I would do it in the beginning. I would not go top down, because you're like, okay, you're doing this great thing for the like local government, for example, and you want to charge low prices. But then once you go down the line of your business, you're like, oh, okay, I'm actually losing money now. So if you were to know it from the beginning, you can actually choose your own model that actually meets the criteria, yeah, of your target customer base. So that's the way I would do it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Is that a fair question?
Yeah, sure.
Fantastic. So thank you, Rosar, for the question, and thank you, Jim, for your time. I believe that's the end of our, wait, let me not use Spotlight, because, okay, I believe that's the end of our session with Jim today. Do you have any closing statement or any final notes?
Yeah, I mean, I did go through some of your prospectuses, and I was very, very impressed with what you guys are doing for Indonesia. So yeah, I really hope to see you guys. I will definitely follow a lot of these companies, and I would say, like, seriously, feel free to reach out to me if you want any other advice, because like I said, some of the stuff you guys are doing is very impressive. I'm working in banking environment, so it doesn't seem so good for the social aspect of Indonesia, but what you guys are doing is amazing, and I'd love to kind of touch base with you guys at some point if you ever need any advice. So yeah, just feel free to reach out to myself or Jody, and he can ask me as well.